James called me first, his voice tight with that big brother authority he'd perfected since we were kids. Mom's crying her eyes out. What the hell did you do? I tried explaining the 5 years of paying their bills, the credit cards opened in my name, the secret transfers, the lies. He cut me off halfway through. There are parents, he said, like that explained everything. You don't just cut them off. They cut me off, I reminded him. Kicked me out on my birthday, remember? They said you've been mooching off them for years and finally refused to get a job. I laughed. Actually laughed, which only made him angrier. James, I've been working 2 jobs for 5 years. Where do you think their mortgage payments were coming from? I don't believe you, he said flatly, and hung up. Tara's approach was different, all sympathy and concern. We're really worried about you, she said. Dad thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. They said you're making up all these stories about paying their bills. I have bank statements, I said. 5 years of bank statements showing transfers to their accounts. But why would you pay their mortgage? That doesn't make sense. I realized then that they really didn't know. My parents had kept their financial exploitation secret even from my siblings. Or had they? Emma's call was the most revealing. At 22, she was the youngest, still living at home while attending community college. Her voice was hushed, like she was hiding somewhere in the house. Is it true? She asked. Have you really been paying for everything? Yes, I said. For years. I thought so, she finally said. I found some bank statements in the trash once. Dad's name, but your account number. I asked about it, and they said you were just helping out temporarily while they were between jobs. That was 3 years ago, Emma. I know. Her voice got even quieter. They're freaking out. Dad's throwing stuff. Mom keeps locking herself in the bathroom to cry. They made me call all these relatives asking for money. That explained the sudden flood of texts from cousins and aunts I barely spoke to, all asking what was going on with my parents. Then something unexpected happened. My mom's sister, Aunt Patty, who I hadn't seen in at least a decade due to some mysterious family rift, sent me a private message on Facebook. Call me, it said. I've been where you are. Her first words were, so they finally did it to you too. What do you mean? I asked. The financial drain? The guilt trips? The entitlement? They did the exact same thing to me 20 years ago. She told me how my parents had moved in with her temporarily after they lost their apartment before I was born. How they never contributed to bills, but always had money for new clothes and dinners out. How they borrowed her car for a weekend trip and returned it with an empty tank and a dent they never mentioned. How they'd opened a credit card in her name and maxed it out buying Christmas presents that made them look generous to the rest of the family. When I finally kicked them out, they told everyone I was mentally unstable and had turned against the family for no reason, she said. Sound familiar? It was like hearing my own story played back to me. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Would you have believed me? They're your parents. They controlled the narrative. She was right. I wouldn't have believed her. Just like James didn't believe me now. The final blow came at a family dinner I wasn't invited to. Emma told me about it later. My parents had gathered all the siblings, cousins, and local relatives to discuss the situation. They'd shown up looking appropriately distressed, told their version of events, and asked for both emotional and financial support. Then James, my skeptical older brother, did something unexpected. He asked to see their bank statements. He wanted proof that I'd been lying about supporting them. My parents refused. Things got heated. James insisted. He said either they showed everyone the bank records or he'd assume I was telling the truth, Emma told me. Dad stormed out. Mom started crying. No bank statements were shown that night, but seeds of doubt were planted. The family split down the middle. Some relatives cut me off completely, while others reached out cautiously once they saw my dad rifling through James's wallet at a subsequent gathering. James called me a week later. I believe you now, he said simply. They tried to borrow money from me yesterday using my own credit card. One by one, my siblings came around as they witnessed our parents' increasingly desperate attempts to find a new financial host. But those relationships were changed forever. Not just with our parents, but with each other. Why hadn't any of them noticed what was happening to me? Why hadn't I trusted them enough to tell them? The grief of those lost connections was real. Some family members I'd never speak to again. Others would take years to rebuild trust with. But as painful as that family fallout was, I was about to discover something I never expected, a sense of freedom I hadn't felt since before my parents lost their jobs 5 years ago. Unexpected freedom. The first night sleeping in my car was a wake-up call. Parked behind a Walmart, I curled up in my backseat with a hoodie as a pillow and my gym membership card as my only comfort. At least I could shower somewhere. 3 nights like that, plus 2 weeks on friends' couches, and I started wondering if financial freedom was worth this level of instability. Then my first post-parents paycheck hit my account. I stared at the balance, confused. After paying my own bills, just my bills, I actually had money left over. Not much, but still. For 5 years, every penny I earned had vanished into the black hole of my parents' expenses. Now, suddenly, I had savings. The concept seemed foreign. I bought myself a decent meal that night. Not fancy, just a burger that wasn't from the dollar menu. It lasted longer than the ramen packets I'd been surviving on in more ways than one. With a notebook and a calculator, I made my first real adult budget. Without my parents' mortgage, utilities, golf membership, wine club, endless restaurant meals, and shopping sprees, I could actually afford a decent apartment of my own. A small one, sure, but mine. 2 months after being kicked out, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in the next town over. Nothing fancy, beige walls, beige carpet, beige everything, but when that key landed in my palm, it felt like life itself returning to me. No one asking for money the minute my paycheck hit. No one making me feel guilty for buying new work shoes when my old ones had holes. Just peace. I started fixing my credit, called the companies, explained the situation, filed fraud reports on the cards I hadn't authorized. It was tedious, frustrating work, but every small victory felt huge. 6 months in, my credit score had climbed nearly 100 points. Not great yet, but moving in the right direction. The financial freedom was amazing, but the emotional freedom, that was life-changing. I bought a new shirt without hearing my mom's voice in my head, asking if I really needed it. I ordered pizza on a Friday night without calculating how many hours I'd need to work to cover it. I slept through the night without waking up panicking about bills. I started saving for things I wanted. Actual goals, not emergencies. A better car, a vacation, maybe someday a down payment on a small house. Things that had seemed impossible just months earlier were now realistic plans. The biggest change came 9 months after freezing the accounts. With my improved credit and steady savings, I could finally do what I'd wanted to do for years, move to Portland. I'd always loved it there, but supporting my parents had made relocating impossible. Now, nothing was holding me back. I found a job at a marketing firm, packed my few belongings into my car, and left the small town I'd been stuck in for years. The Portland rain on my windshield as I crossed the city limits felt like a baptism, washing away 5 years of financial servitude. My apartment in Portland was even smaller than my previous one, but I didn't care. I was 3 hours away from my parents and their drama. I made new friends who knew nothing about my family history. I dated without the embarrassment of living with my parents at 30 or having to explain why I couldn't afford dinner and a movie in the same night. I went to therapy, something I'd never been able to afford before. Talking through the years of financial abuse helped me recognize patterns I was still carrying. The fear of checking my bank account, the guilt about spending money on myself, the tendency to lend money to friends even when I couldn't afford it. The most surprising realization? How many other relationships in my life had become toxic because I'd normalized financial exploitation. The friend who always forgot his wallet, the ex-girlfriend who expected me to pay for everything, the coworker who never paid me back for lunch. I started setting boundaries with everyone, not just my parents. A year and a half after being kicked out, I took my first real vacation in over 6 years. Nothing extravagant, a long weekend in Seattle, but I'll never forget sitting at that waterfront restaurant, watching the sunset, and realizing I didn't feel guilty about spending money on the experience. I wasn't mentally calculating how many shifts I'd need to pick up to cover my parents' cable bill. I was just present, happy. The fear of cutting ties with family had kept me trapped for years. The reality of life without that toxic connection turned out to be the opposite of what I'd feared. Instead of struggling, I thrived. Instead of loneliness, I found authentic relationships. Instead of guilt, I found self-worth. Don't get me wrong, there's still pain there. Still moments when I see a father and son fishing together or a family celebrating a birthday and feel that twinge of loss. But then I remember what those relationships really cost me, and I know I made the right choice. Yet sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn when doubts creep in, I still wonder if there might have been another way. They're my parents after all. Did I go too far? Was I wrong? That nagging question follows me on quiet nights when memories surface. The weight of my decisions sits heavy sometimes. Was I wrong to cut them off so completely? I still remember birthdays when Mom would decorate the entire house, Dad teaching me to throw a baseball in the backyard, family movie nights with popcorn fights and laughter. Those good memories exist alongside the exploitation. They're real too, and sometimes they make me question everything. Society has pretty clear expectations about family obligations. Parents take care of kids, then kids take care of parents when they get older. Every heartwarming commercial showing adult children helping their elderly parents sends that twist of guilt through my stomach. Am I the villain in this story? My friend Marco certainly thinks so. They're your blood, he says whenever the topic comes up. You only get one set of parents. He takes care of his mom, even though she drives him crazy. Sends her money every month, calls her every Sunday. He can't understand why I couldn't just set better boundaries instead of freezing the accounts. Then there's my coworker Jen, who thinks I didn't go far enough. You should have pressed charges, she says flatly. What they did was criminal. Her parents stole her identity when she was in college, and 20 years later, she's still dealing with the credit fallout. She hasn't spoken to them since she was 19 and doesn't regret it for a second. I fall somewhere in the middle. Some days I'm sure I did the right thing. Other days I wonder if I should have tried harder to fix things instead of cutting them off completely. The guilt hits hardest during holidays. Last Christmas, I sat in my apartment alone, eating takeout and watching movies, suddenly remembering how my mom used to make incredible cinnamon rolls every Christmas morning. For a few minutes, I almost called her. Then I remembered those cruise photos. The image of them toasting with fancy cocktails on deck while I ate ramen for the 12th time that month. The bank manager's face when she showed me the vacation fund transfers they'd set up from my account without my knowledge. The guilt fades, replaced by a